Alright guys, welcome to the next video in the series on installing the air suspension. This video is going to be dedicated to plumbing only. Basically we're going to break up every video into little sections. This way when you're working on a specific area, you can just kind of load up the video and do that. If you missed the video on what I purchased and why, check in the upper right corner now. You will be able to find that video right there and kind of go through why I purchased what I purchased. So in this video, it's plumbing. It's what I'm using here, how to cut your lines using an actual line cutter, measurements of these, the NPT versus the PTC measurements, and the hosing and everything. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is probably one of the more confusing and more annoying things that you have to figure out to make sure you have all your fittings and everything that you need to plug up the tank, get it all ready and running. So we're going to talk about two different measurements. The first is NPT, or National Pipe Thread. This is a standard. So this is a plug, and the plug it's an NPT. This is a 1/8. So as you can see, this is not 1/8 of an inch. The outer diameter is usually between 3.9 and 4.05, and I just lost it. No big deal. Got more. So it is not 1/8 inch. It doesn't measure 1/8 inch. It measures closer to 1/4 of an inch, or a little bit more, which is going to confuse you when you're trying to figure all these out. All right. So we have 1/8 inch, which is the smallest one that I have. We have 1/4 inch, which is where most of my fittings are. Then we have 3/8, which in the 3/8 area, we're talking about measuring a little more than 1/2 of an inch. And then we have the 1/2 inch, which measures more like 3/4 of an inch. So you got to look at your tanks and find out which fittings that your tank has. So when you're working with a 3/8 tube air suspension, so we'll talk about the tube in a second. When you're working with 3/8 air suspension, many of the things that you're going to get are going to come in the 1/4 and 1/8 range. I don't remember how many feet this is, but generally this should be enough to do the car. All right, so 3/8 is a little rigid. You don't want to bend a hard radius. It does require 1.5 inches from the connector before you start bending. So you want to give it a little bit of space before a connector. You don't want to have it in a connector and then bend it hard. Now let's talk about the other end of the fitting, the PTC side. This is where the air line goes. So on the PTC, you have the measurement of the outer diameter of your tubing, and that's an exact measurement. So this is a 3/8 OD tube, or this is a brake line basically. So you're going to look for, on your lines that you order, you're going to want to make sure that they are a DOT approved, and for brake lines. They're lined with something on the inside, they're hard plastic, and they are a little difficult to use. Now, I'm not going to say difficult, they're more difficult than this super flexy 1/4 inch line, which we'll talk about in a second. But getting back to the 3/8 line, I chose the 3/8 line because it does air up your suspension faster. Allows a lot more airflow through if you take a look at the comparison between the two lines. And also, it just, for me, the outer shell feels a lot harder and a lot more stiff. So yes, it's a little bit more difficult to run because you can't make sharp radiuses. So this is about the comfortable bend range before you start getting ready to, actually, like this, before you start getting ready to kink it, where you can have a really tight radius on a 1/4 inch line. And if you're going with a height sensing system, so if you have height sensors and you want those super fast adjustments to keep the car level, go with a 3/8. So getting back to push to connect. So basically these work as follows. You push them in firm. Well, first thing you do is use a tubing cutter to make sure you get a clean 90-degree angle on your tube. I just hit the camera with that. Okay, jagged edges, anything like that, no good. Scratches up the tube. So you want to make sure your airline is clean. You want to make sure there's no scratches going this way because it will cause leaks. Then you insert that into your PTC. It slides right in. You push hard and then you pull and it locks in place. To release, you push this down and pull the tube out. Probably feel a little leery about shoving a tube in there and having it lock, but these work really well. They have a very low failure rate as long as you install them correctly, and again, your tubing is clean. Now for the other fittings here. So we have a whole bunch of plugs here, and we're going to plug up all the empty holes. I like to use 565 thread sealant from Loctite. This does form a more of a permanent seal, so you do have to crack it free if you want to bring it out and clean it out, but I don't know. I just personally trust this over some Teflon tape. But Teflon tape does work. People use it all the time. But if you are going to use this, you can't pressurize the tank for about 24 hours. The bond strength is fully achieved within the first 24 hours. It's about 90%, and you can air up the tank. So this is why today we're going to do the tank plumbing and the wiring. Then I'm going to go take a nap, come back tomorrow, finish this off. All right, so we have all the plugs. I'll show you how to do one or two of these. I'm not going to have you watch me do all of them. The next set of fittings, and this is dependent on your tank. So the AccuAir Endo T comes with a pressure relief already installed. So this pressure relief is going to release the pressure when it reaches 400 psi. It'll release the pressure of the tank. It's a safety mechanism. You either need to have it in the tank or have it on the outside of the tank. So the way these work is generally you screw this end into the tank. You have your 1/4 inch air hose because it's just a pressure relief. You have your 1/4 inch air hose going to here. You have it coming out of here to a Schrader valve. So at that point, anytime you can pop the Schrader valve and completely empty out your tank. So I have a Schrader valve here. You would pop this open and you can completely empty out your tank for maintenance. Another good thing is if your pumps stop working, you can connect this to any air source and fill up your tank to get your suspension going. So it's another safety mechanism to have this on the outside. Always have a pressure relief valve. Do not install a system without a pressure relief valve. All right, so since we have a pressure relief valve, we're not going to need this T-connect because we have one already installed, so this we'll put aside. Schrader valves, definitely get a couple of these, and I'll give you some examples. If at any time you have a cut line, so say you drive over a piece of shrapnel in the road, it kicks up and slices your airline. I carry a kit in my car with a bunch of spare airline, cutting tools, and Schrader valves. So say this is my strut over here. Say this is my cut airline. I'll come up to it. I'll find a spot on the airline that's not damaged. I'll slice it. I'll pop a Schrader valve on it. And then I'll take my pump in my car and pump up that air strut so I can drive home. So just keep that in mind. Have Schrader valves, have extra lines, and a cutter, and some tools in your car. So in case you do slice a line, it doesn't happen often, but you get that perfect storm and you break a line, having these parts in the car with you are really going to save your butt. All right, so the first step is to find and define all of your holes. Okay, so we have, these holes are plugs. Now this hole down at the base is going to be my drain, but I don't have my drain as of right now. So I'm going to plug that hole with some Teflon tape. So I'll show you how to do Teflon tape. But for now, we're going to get that piece in there. Take that protective coating out of the way. Get that in there, get that in there. We'll do this side at another time. Okay, so on this side, we've got the 3/8 inlet for the air pumps. Right here, we've already got some type of sealant on there. If your fittings come with sealant, there is no need to apply any sealant additional. Okay, so this is going to be the output to the system. This is going to be a plug. And again, this is a big plug, but it's only a 3/8. Okay, so we've got this 1/4. That is for the air pump. We've got the 2 3/8 there, or the 2/4 there. We got this giant 1/2 inch. We've got the 1/8. Again, you want to mock all this stuff up to make sure you have everything before you start sealing all these threads in place. the dryer is going to go in place on the output on the opposite side. So we have the input for the pump. We have, don't forget, for some of you guys that don't have this, if you don't have a included pressure release, you want to have your output for the pressure release. Then I have my other inlet for the air pump. All right, so when applying the thread sealant, we're going to use this big one as an example. You want to skip that top thread. You don't want any thread sealant, or when you're using Teflon tape, you want that last thread to be free of anything. You don't want any of that stuff getting into the system and blowing through everything and coming out into your, I don't know, your bags or your airlines. So always, thread locker stops at that last thread. If you're using the 565 like I'm using, what I like to do is have a lot of towels around, because this crap is really messy. It gets on everything almost as, actually it's like heatsink compound or brake grease. It's terrible. So what you do is you knead it, you know, you get it all squished together, you mix it up. Once you're done with that, now I've used this already, so it's already kneaded. I'll show you a smaller one. I'm not going to show you this one, because this one involves me saying a lot of curse words and stuff that I don't like to put in my YouTube videos. So let's use a more normal size one that you're going to be experiencing. Find my wrench. We'll do a 3/4 goop on this. And again, this stuff needs to sit for at least 24 hours before you pressurize the system. So you might want to do this the night before. One of the things that I overlooked last night, because I was just too tired and too lazy after a full day of work. All right, there we go. We got that 3/4 coverage. Get that in there. And we'll flip this over so we can do that. There you go. As you can see, it's working its way completely around the threads now. I keep hitting the camera, I apologize. Okay, that's finger tight. Give ourselves a point of reference for halfway. And we can go a little bit more, halfway to a full turn. So we're past the halfway point. I'd say we're good now. Again, you don't want to torque these down all the way, because you could do some damage to the threads. Okay, we do a cleanup wipe. And as I do a cleanup wipe, I get it all over my hands. So that's why don't cheap out. Just use as many paper towels as you possibly can. There we go. All right, looking good. I'm going to do a couple more plugs off camera, and then we'll go ahead and do the air pumps. By the way, if you see here, we got a little cutout in this area here. This is where all the air lines are going to cut through, and some of the electronics are going to come up from. Okay, as you can see, that lines up right over the top of our hole. Get these out of the way. We're going to remount the tank. Okay, you want to make sure all your holes on the underside of the tank are sealed up. One of the important things is you want all your drains, your drain or your pressure release valve, to be at the bottom of the tank. Just keep that in mind. Oh, I just knocked you guys out of whack. Okay, and then this rotates and locks into place. And we are going to use just one of these, one of the set screws to hold it down. Done. All right. Next step, I'm only going to show you one of these, but we're going to do the thread sealer for the pumps, and pretty much onto the wiring shortly after. And we're doing thread sealer only 3/4 of the way around. Make sure we get a good amount when I have an even coverage. I'd rather wipe it off the back end than have it leak. All right. We're not going to put this on the carpet. go. Got a nice flow going all the way around. And it looks like we're going all the way with this one. All right, let me go grab a wrench. There we go. And that's it. Now we got some white around there. That's going to be a little more difficult to get off.
5 hours later.
All right. One in, one to go. For those of you guys who missed this on Instagram, so I 3D printed this manifold mount. So this is the mount to hold the manifold. It holds it right up and above the air tank perfectly and routes the line straight down into the opening. The problem is I printed this. It took 2 days, about 1 day, 11 hours, and I printed it on PLA. PLA melts at like 180 to 220. Cars get up to 150. So I'm assuming that this, although it is rock solid, is not going to hold up inside of a car. So rather than risk safety, we're not going to use it. I'm going to probably mount the manifold to a board or something. So give me some time to figure that out, and we'll continue. All right, so when you're connecting your plumbing lines, you want to make sure that they have a clean right angle. That's what this tool comes in handy with. You center it in the V's, you chop off the end. Now, I want to determine the path of my tubing. Because this is a line that I can easily just chop out and service later, let's get this out of the way. I'm not too worried about a service loop. I'm assuming we can go straight in. I'm taking the time to label all of these so I know that the second one is a tank connection. Push it in, feel it click, give it a twist, pull it out. Good to go. Okay, this makes a nice connection. Okay, it may be in the way of some of the other tubing. We'll check that out later. And we'll give myself a bend. Now my camera is in the way, so let me move this part. Make sure you guys can still see. And we got a nice straight connection in there. Give myself a teeny bit of extra play. You can cut these to whatever size you need. You want to make sure that the end is clean, that there's no scrapes or cuts on it. And I did cut it a little too long. My bad. Let's cut this down a little more. Again, check for scrapes. Looks good. Slide this in and give it a tug. Okay, so we have the tank into the manifold. For the electrical wiring, this is all I care about. For the plumbing test, the only things you really want to worry about is to make sure that all the plugs are in the tank. You want to make sure all your pumps are connected to the tank. In the AccuAir setup, there was a separate pressure sensor. In the Airlift Performance, the pressure sensor is inside the manifold, so you don't have a separate pressure sensor, which is kind of nice. It keeps the wiring easy. And then you want to have your output from the tank into the manifold. The rest is cake because you can activate each one of these, front right, front left, so on. You can just turn them on, it'll blow high pressure air into your trunk, making a dusty mess, but at least you'll know it works. And what you want to do, power up the system, fill up the tank, and make sure the pressure doesn't drop or rise. Now there's a calculation between outside temperature. So if you fill it up to say 150 psi, and then overnight the temperature drops 10 degrees, the tank pressure will drop 2 psi. So there's a calculation and a chart to figure that out, but you want to make sure that your tank pressure doesn't drop. Sounds like they're having a birthday party celebration. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to record the wiring portion of this video. Don't worry, that's coming in a separate video. We're going to get this online and I'll show you the pressure test. If you want to check out the electrical video, that should be coming out in the next couple days.